all of you who have gathered here on this platform to listen to Dr. Siva Prasad's very interesting lecture on AI and indigenous people. It's a pleasure to invite everybody on behalf of Anthropos India Foundation. My name is Dr. Shweta Anand, and I work with AIF full time. Um, it's really cold in Delhi. So some of us are going to be overdressed for the occasion with caps and mufflers. Anyway, India is such a diverse country. We all are wearing different season clothes at any point in a given year. So anyway, that aside, Anthropos India Foundation is a trust that was established in 2011, and a lot of activities keep happening here, which are both academic, which are based in the field. We also publish. Uh, to name a few, we have a monthly newsletter, which is very famous now. We get very good feedback every month on the kind of articles, and we have distinguished anthropologists of the month who we interview every month. And then in the subsequent month, we have this lecture series, like Sir is here today. So tomorrow we'll be interviewing him for our newsletter. So you can also read more. Then there's a digital magazine, which is a quarterly multilingual feature and very, very participative. It's called Childhood Matters. And all of you are invited to send your articles. We have a very vibrant website. Hopefully, you've seen it. I I can request someone from our team to please give the web address in the chat. Please check it out, and you can connect with us with your submissions for the newsletter and the quarterly magazine, Childhood Matters. Further, apart from such free workshops, which are meant for reviving the anthropological traditions and the discourse, we also do other workshops, more technical. Thanks, Aryan. More technical, and where we have experts from all over the place who are training young people. For example, we had a recent workshop on ethical use of artificial intelligence in research in social sciences, which was very, very well attended and very much praised. So anyway, so a lot of our activities are also visible on the website. Please feel free to explore and stay connected with us. More about it towards the end of today's session. And with that, I welcome Sir and all the other participants. And I hand over to Dr. Sunita Reddy, our very, very cheerful and energetic and visionary, I would say, founder chairperson of Anthropos India Foundation. And the very reason that I find myself here is because of her. So over to you, Dr. Reddy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shweta. Good evening, everyone, and I welcome one and all for this very, very interesting lecture by Professor Shiva Prasad, sir. And sir happens to be my teacher too. You can imagine it's now the third generation where young scholars are also listening to him. And sir, I don't see any change except for some gray hair. That's it. So thank you so much for joining. Let me introduce sir briefly to all those who have joined. There are a few Hyderabad University uh, alumni also joining this lecture. Dr. Sivaprasad sir did his PhD from Mysore through ISEC, and he is also honorary professor CDLTR University of Hyderabad. He has been RBI chair professor and also regional director CSD in Hyderabad. He started his career as an assistant professor at ISEC Bangalore. He was also consultant sociology, home consultants Bangalore, assistant professor at ICSIM Bangalore, and lecturer in PG studies sociology Mangalore University. Dr. Prasad has guided research students and published many papers and books on the subject. He is a member of editorial boards of various journals. He is associated with two national commissions for DNSNT, that's Denotified Tribes, Government of India. He is also a member of Danish Missions in Karnataka. Dr. Prasad is currently a member of Information Ethics Working Group, UNESCO-IFAP, and steering committee member and Translations Commons. I welcome you, sir, and we are looking forward to hearing you on a very, very interesting topic and very contemporary topic.
Thank you.
We can have the lecture and then open for question answer. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it okay if I do without the PPT, or you want me to?
Whatever you wish, sir. Whatever is comfortable.
Because sometimes time is lost because I've always had problems.
Nice. I think oral lecture is good, and
yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me for this lecture. In fact, since just before my retirement in 2018, I started working on issues relating to digital technologies, and then how digital technologies are the ones that influence. Anybody?
So a little clarity, if you can, speak closer to the mic and maybe.
Okay.
And little in the middle of the screen. So.
Maybe I will increase my speaker volume.
That would be better. Yeah.
Am I clear now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I have been working on the impact of digital technologies and how digital technologies are, important in many areas, especially when we are dealing with indigenous communities. I find that these communities are being used by the technologies. But at the same time, the technology is useful also to help the communities. Now, as a kind of a general prelude to the talk, I would like to say that, if we look at the whole process of development of technology, it is always associated with the, progress of human societies. And in fact, depending on the nature of society, when we talk about, the approaches to technology also differed. Because when we are dealing with the indigenous community, their kind of technological development, the way they are put to use, etc., is different from the other societies. Like, in other words, the technology, the way it is developed, the way it is used, differed from society to society. And this is where we find the differences in terms of their uses. Like, the indigenous people who actually lived in the midst of the nature, they have also innovated technologies which are in line with the surrounding nature. Because that kind of a technology helped them to both conserve and also to manage the resources in a much better manner. So this is where, if you look at the same technology which is used by the indigenous communities, which is, we might call it as a very, kind of much poor kind of a technology. But actually, like, for example, even our plow, traditional plow, which is used even today by many of the rural and indigenous farmers, they are still basic and important, but their purpose is to conserve nature, at the same time govern or manage their resources in a very fruitful manner. In fact, what has happened was, the kind of a technology basically facilitated these communities to manage their lives in harmony with the nature. That's one thing that we must remember. And this is one side where you find indigenous communities using or innovating the technologies which are in line with their kind of livelihoods, line with protecting the resources, etc. In contrast to that, we find the others, I would say others, have evolved technologies. The purpose here of these technologies is to control, to manage, and even harness the resources. Because we think that we can control the nature, we can do anything with the nature, because that's where, when the nature recoils, we have nothing else to do. But we think that we can dictate and control and harness the resources. So that is where we have, the others have evolved technologies basically for controlling, for managing, for harnessing the resources, besides for also controlling the people and other aspects or other things. Because even look at the way in colonialism, the slavery and other things have emerged. And they tried to use the technology, tried to use the resources to control the resources, to appropriate the resource, all that. So these are the two contrasts. So therefore, we find a difference in terms of approach to technological development, which is basically linked to the nature of human societies. The human societies which are living closely in proximity with the nature, their kind of a technology, their kind of usage of the technology is different from the technology that is innovated otherwise. Like your tractors, your tillers, all these things are of a different nature altogether. And I will also say why that is important for us to understand, because because the indigenous communities or the rural peasants never considered digging the earth deep is good, because they say that it is hurting the mother earth. And that's where we find earlier we always considered them as stupid, but today we say that the more you dig the earth, you are exposing the carbon into the atmosphere. That's where no tillage agriculture or zero tillage agriculture has become an in thing now. In fact, this is where the wisdom of the indigenous communities or the peasants was questioned earlier. Now we say that that is not a bad idea, but we still do not recognize that. Why I'm saying this is the contrast in terms of technological development and their uses, which will be useful when we talk a little later. In other words, this basically is nothing but a difference in approach to technological development related to nature of human societies. And this has a bearing on the development of inequalities that are also linked to cultural matrices that we have today. Because the traditional technologies which were used are least, they have caused least kind of inequalities, whereas the other kind of technologies have caused wider disparities. So we find the development of inequalities also is linked to the technological developments, and also linked to the cultural matrices, the societies from which they are coming from, and to which the kind of technology that they've used for their development. In other words, what we notice is, we notice a complex relationship between technological development, social and cultural aspects of inequalities, and economic development. Now, this is basically what we see if you really analyze the entire process of technological development, entire process of social and cultural aspects of inequalities, and also economic development. Now, the same thing also has bearing on what we are going to talk about today. That is, why artificial intelligence? In fact, today, if you really see, artificial intelligence is permeating all aspects of human life. There's nothing that it has not touched, except that, families and the social relations. Even we don't know how they will be also affected later, much more seriously, which are partly is happening now. So AI is permeating all aspects of human life, not sparing even those living in proximity to nature. This is what that means, including the indigenous communities are not spared. So it is leading to basically the replacement of human labor and decision-making process, management of different activities, and whatever we have. That means it is there in all kinds of realms of human life. So in other words, there is no area that it has not been applied to, of course, except for replacing the personal or cultural and familial life of individual humans. It is also affecting, not that it is not affecting. Like you have your mobile phones, your social media and all that, they are also affecting the familial and other relationships. But at least still, the AI is not replaced the families and familiar relations and all that. In other words, while AI has many positive contributions to human living, it has negative aspects which we need to take note of while scrutinizing the applications of artificial intelligence. There are negative aspects because now we are using AI through drones. Drones are used in wars, and whereas drones are also used in agriculture and other cultivation of things. So it is, in a way, we need to use our discretion and caution. And that means since AI is the creation of humans, it can further accelerate the biases, inequalities, because they are already there in the societies. They can only further accelerate because they are used by the same set of people who create the algorithms. The biases that are already there, the inequalities that are already there, they get further accelerated. That's why we need to understand artificial intelligence and why artificial intelligence is important in the present day life and how it is affecting the indigenous communities. And another important thing that we find is there is a good appeal of artificial intelligence. That we don't need to further state that the significance of AI in today's life, because it's a competing world economies of and development. In fact, every country is now trying to invest so much of money on artificial intelligence for as a part of developmental kind of exercises. And in fact, you find it is, in fact, the value in addressing solutions to many complex problems, since they find AI can help, there's a lot of investment in that. In fact, it runs into billions of dollars in today's economic calculations. India is also investing a lot of money into that. Many developing countries are doing it. Same hierarchies between nations exist as inequalities exist amongst our societies. In other words, the impact of AI, like the technology, is not uniform across societies. And it is much more so on the weaker sections of society. So that we find the same earlier technological impacts were also based on that kind of unequal access, unequal distribution, all that. Same is also the case with AI. AI within the societies, weaker sections don't get it. Within the nation states, weaker nations don't get much of it. So the need of the hour is to basically to address the negative implications of the AI on the indigenous, marginalized, and deprived communities in many parts of the globe. I'm not only talking about only India or Asia or others, including Latin America and many other countries where large number of indigenous communities live. And in other words, if you really look at what kinds of projections are made by scholars who are working in this area, is that by 2030, the economic contribution of artificial intelligence to the global economy is estimated to be about $22 trillion, which is a very huge amount. I think even it must have reached even now more than 3/4 of it. And many of the advanced economies, they have been investing huge sums on artificial intelligence. This was by one of the scholars who has been working on AI, is Marshall. It was published in 2019. he suggested this. Now, given this, what we need is we need to look into the moot question. That is, whether AI results in furthering equality, or does it lead to destruction or deprivation and marginalization of the indigenous and marginal communities? That means whether AI can help, or will it further accelerate the existing kind of inequalities and further deprivation that happens. In fact, we also have, for example, the electric cars we consider as something contributing to reduction in carbon in the atmosphere, which is not true. Initially, I also felt so, but then to produce that, the amount of mining and other kinds of things that happen adds further to the kind of degradation of environment. And also, the kind of consumption of electricity for producing that is also, enormous. Which means to produce that electricity, you need much more, coal and other kinds of thermal and other kind of electricity, which is not reducing the kind. Because people project as if this is climate friendly. It may be climate friendly. If what kind of things are climate friendly are the ones which can run on solar, not with much of a big batteries, but with kind of a different. But now we need development of technologies to help that. But then these are all high-ended and useful for bigger people, not for the indigenous. That's where how these kind of technologies we need to question is whether it is furthering equality, or is it furthering deprivation, marginalization of the indigenous and marginal societies, is the one thing that we must always question. Because this is important that we need to address if we want to achieve sustainable development and to ensure inclusive societies and economies. Unless and until we make this as our goal, using of AI will not be for the good of the people. We must ensure that it should address to the sustainable development, achievement of sustainable development using the AI, and it should be also inclusive. It should lead to inclusive societies and inclusive economies. And this is where I would like to bring in, because this is what I was talking about AI and the kinds of things that exist because of technologies development and the kind of cleavages that are there. Let us understand about the indigenous people. Now, if you look at the indigenous people, and I talked about partly also about the environment, other issues, not so much in depth, because in this lecture, I may not have much to talk about that, though I will refer to it here and there. If you look at the World Bank report in 2020, cited by some scholars, the indigenous population actually, which we all know have the statistics available to us, it forms about 6% of the world population, living in more than 90 countries. India has a substantial indigenous population. We have about 8% of the population. And also due to their traditional, ecological, and cultural knowledge, they have been protecting, this is most important point that we must remember. See, 6% of population of the world is protecting 80% of the so far remaining world biodiversity. This is tremendous. 80% of the so far remaining biodiversity is protected by these indigenous populations. Now, that is because they have the kind of ecological and cultural knowledge. They have used that and they have been using it to protect this. Therefore, the local cultural or indigenous knowledge and the preservation of their languages becomes very important for sustainable development and also important for protecting the world's natural resources. And this is what that's what I'm saying. If you want to have a sustainable development, in the earlier part I mentioned about AI, then you need this. You need to protect, or you need to conserve, or you need to promote the cultural or indigenous knowledge, preserve their language, because most of them are oral. The oral cultures, they carried all this knowledge from generation to generation, both by demonstration, also by their transference from, to both vertical and horizontal kind of transfer of that knowledge. And that's where the indigenous people, I just cursorily mentioned, who form 6% to protect the 80% of the biodiversity that is remaining today, which means the rest of the 20 is not in their hands. In fact, if they would not have done this, even that 80% would not have been there. Now it's happening in India. In fact, many of the forest regions, Adivasi regions are all given to miners, and new forests are being denuded. In spite of the protests, the governments don't care. And here, having discussed about indigenous communities and their kind of effort to protect nature because of their living in close and proximity to nature, as they did with the traditional kind of technology even. Now, let me talk about indigenous people and artificial intelligence. In fact, many studies, like I said about Marshall's study earlier, it is very widely acknowledged that AI-driven software with traditional knowledge, they found, some of the scholars found, can solve complex problems, especially in areas like in agriculture, health, environment management, or you name any of that, including climate change, all that we are talking about. And in fact, there is a beautiful work done by scholars of AI, especially from the indigenous communities. It is available on the website. It is I recall that. In fact, I give you the reference. Everyone must go through that, because this is anthropologically very important. Also, in terms of indigenous communities, it is very important. I'll recall that name and then let you know that. And that means here, scholars have recognized that AI-driven software incorporating the traditional knowledge, or with the traditional knowledge, that means you can use traditional knowledge and AI-driven software to develop modules to find solutions to the problems, can solve complex problems. In fact, people are now trying to find out how to improve health services, how to improve using the indigenous knowledge. In fact, earlier we debunked them, now we recognize the entire, ethnozoology, ethnobotany, how pharmacopoeia of the traditional kind, how they are important to develop solutions to the health and other problems, including animal health. And so what we need to look at in this context is, we need to consider the impact of technologies, especially artificial intelligence, on indigenous cultural and intellectual property. So if I am trying to take that knowledge and apply or convert or digitalize that into artificial intelligence modules, then it has an impact on the indigenous cultural and intellectual property rights. This is also another important, because many of them are exploited by this. In fact, we all know the famous case of the Kani tribe and the ICMR, this thing you can check on the website, how they try to give, somebody worked as a key informant and told when they were walking for a long distances, they were not getting tired, the Kani tribe, whereas the scientists who went along, they were getting tired. They've asked the community, especially the person who was interpreting things for them. He said, why is that you are not able to get tired where we are getting tired? He simply said, there is some leaves on the way, they chew. In fact, the names, the botanical name of the leaf and everything is also given. And then they worked on that, developed a kind of they titled this Ayurvedic medicine, patented it, and they gave right to this person who was given the knowledge. He said, it is not my knowledge, it is my community's knowledge. We don't have any kind of patent system for, rights given to community, property rights to community. It's only individual. And similar is the case with properties, individual properties, not the community properties. Indigenous communities have community properties. So these are all issues that need to be addressed to. I will touch upon that a little later. So our greater concern today with regard to the ethical and social implications of AI on the communities, basically because these are greater concerns which are bothering the academia, and also it should bother the industry and the public. Even academia should be bothered about it. So many studies have shown that AI-driven technologies have accelerated the social divides further. The inequalities among historically marginalized societies is much more wide. That means you will find not only digital divide, but also other things. In fact, most of you are familiar what happened during COVID time. Online classes and other things, the digital divide is very clear. Children from very poor families could not have access to anything. In fact, we have seen also pictures. Some students in Rajasthan climbed onto some distributor, there are no signals. To catch signal somewhere they climbed. In fact, we did notice when we went to field work with our students. In some places, there is only in interior villages, in some spot where some signal comes. Everybody used to go and stand there to get signals. Now that is the state of affairs. So what happens is that if we are stealing their knowledge without their kind of involvement, then they are further alienated, further kind of marginalized in this. So that is where most of the studies have clearly brought out this, how AI-driven technologies have accelerated the social divides and inequalities. It is more among historically marginalized societies. I don't need to say who are the historically marginal societies. We all know it. And that's where it is. It's not only I'm talking about India, it is also everywhere. These are the things that are brought out. I remember that book, report, Indigenous Protocol. It was in 2019. These are all scholars who worked in that. Indigenous Protocol 2019, where they tried to show how this is further accelerating problems. And in fact, this is also true with the underdeveloped and developing countries. Like what has happened there, it's also happening with underdeveloped, developing, and least developed countries. Earlier, now they call middle income and low income countries and all that, because the third world and other things are out of date now for them, because terminology needs to be changed so that people forget what the other kinds of things happen. Because like we change our names of the places, names of cities, all that. Because no other thing can change, because we are not just investing on that. we change names because we have to print new kinds of tickets and spend on stationery, spend on nothing. That amount of money could have been spent on little communities which can do better otherwise. Anyway, that aside, it is the kind of a divide is also the technological divide, AI and other divide is also true with the developing countries in contrast to the developed countries. We are far ahead. They are far ahead. Where did they get all that money? Looted from the South, global South. And global North is trying to control, but now people from the global South are organizing and contesting this. And people from the global South are also investing into these technologies so that they can compete and they can at least catch up, if not completely compete with them. So what we need is a deeper understanding of the social impact of artificial intelligence in diverse social settings is essential for understanding the development, implementation, and monitoring of the AI. Especially, I call it as responsible and beneficial AI technologies. And it becomes the basis for meaningful regulation of these technologies. This is very important. Regulating these technologies, not by somebody, but by the people whose knowledge is utilized, whose knowledge is appropriated for sustainable development of things, whose knowledge is appropriated for large development of economies and other things. So that is where I'm saying a deeper understanding of the social impact of AI in diverse social settings is necessary precursor for the development, implementation, and monitoring of responsible and beneficial AI technologies. That is the basis for meaningful regulation of these technologies. Now, AI is highly likely to have markedly different social impacts, as we saw how the technologies have differently marked social impacts, depending on the cultural settings, as societies have unequal or societies have unequal access to it. They also have something unique ethical vocabularies. Each society, you see, in fact, we all know how we appropriate the technologies. We still worship on Ayudha Puja day, on the Durgashtami day, computers and other things. Because everything that is used in production and other kinds of things are giving livelihood, are to be worshipped. That is the kind of a tradition that we have. But it doesn't mean if you worship, put tika on the computer and all that, computer work better. In fact, computer might go bad because if the dust cuts into that. But idea is we have that kind of inequality. But people, why they have used that kind of a knowledge is basically to respect the nature and respect to bring the technology to make a part of the social system. The technology becomes vital for us. And that system, it should, unless it gets embedded into culture, it cannot become a part of cultural, cultural dimension of that particular set. Because same technology used diversely in different ways, interpreted in different ways, is exactly what I'm trying to drive at. That means the impact of AI is dependent on cultural settings and also the kind of ethical vocabularies, understandings, and expectations that the societies have. But we need to take note of them. And also we need to take note of the perceptions and understandings of AI, how they are likely to be profoundly shaped by local cultures and social context. That means it is not that you can have a uniform kind of a application of AI. I'm trying to tell this because the knowledge that exists is local, and the problems that exist in the environment are local, not universal. The kind of it's a big business today. the kind of environmental crisis and all that, created by the people. And the solutions lie in the local knowledges and local people. And that is where we need to understand the expectations and also perceptions and understandings of AI, how they can affect or how they can be shaped by local cultures and social context. And that is where we need to use. That means what we need to do is amplification of social inequalities through AI technologies can actually increase social instability. That means it puts the entire societies at risk. People will rebel with potentially far-reaching geopolitical consequences. Now, what is happening is that if you totally leave it to some fellows, they'll destroy it, like what is happening in all wars. You can see how Israel is destroying the whole of Palestine, Syria, or other countries. It is the technology, it is the AI which they are using it for negative kinds of things. But countries, others, if they become silent, then they are also part of it. So AI has to be understood here as a techno-social system, which means it has the technological aspects of AI are very intimately linked to its social aspects. And this is what, in the indigenous protocol, scholars have highlighted it, which means that social values and cultural assumptions actually shape the way we perceive, the way we design and use AI. Because if we can mold our knowledge systems and our cultural perspectives or things, to mold it into AI, because the society's cultural imagination and its technologies are very closely linked. Unless and until that's what I said, unless it becomes a part of our cultural terminology or idiom, we can't understand that. And because all technologies are closely linked to the society's cultural imagination, and that means the technologies are closely connected to that. So that is where social values and cultural assumptions actually shape how we perceive, how we design and use AI. This should be the kind of thing the government should take note of, or academics should take note of, or people working among the indigenous community should take note of. Now, given the current context, AI technologies actually are reinforcing the digital divide and also might introduce new types of exclusion. So that is where we need to create indigenous AI to protect the identities and cultural ethos of marginalized communities across the globe. This is what, as anthropologists, as people who want to see how AI can be beneficial to the communities, so that if they can prosper, they can take challenges from the other divides. They can minimize that kind of a challenges. So that means we need to create indigenous AI to protect the identities, cultural ethos, and also their entire socio-cultural kind of living. I'm not saying they should live in that kind of a structure, but their kind of ethical way of living in tune with the nature without destroying the nature, by protecting the nature, by protecting humanity. That's how it should be looked at. So what is important here is indigenous epistemologies. They provide a pre-existing value system. Because that is required, because the pre-existing value systems which require mutual respect between humans and machines. And there must be more research into the practical implementation of relational dynamics and indigenous perspectives into AI systems. This is what many scholars have been arguing. This is what is essential. That is possible only by using indigenous epistemology. That means indigenous thinking, indigenous kind of a perspectives. And that means that there is a mutual respect between humans and machines, which existed earlier in the societies which they lived in. So we need to have research into the practical implementation of this relational dynamics and indigenous perspectives into AI system. This is what was talked about by persons like Maitra and others. And which means the indigenous data sovereignty. In fact, this is another important dimension you must remember. There is an indigenous data sovereignty movement which was quite active. They said, because my data are taken, I must have that right over my data. My knowledge is taken, I must have right over my knowledge. So the indigenous data sovereignty movement basically dealt with the rights of indigenous people to own, to control, to access, and to possess data, which basically derive from them. And it is pertaining to their knowledge, that knowledge systems of their members, their customs and territories. When you are putting AI algorithms into that, then they must have data sovereignty, they must have right. In fact, this is where the scholars today are talking about ethical AI because of that. I use because companies, tech companies use AI to further appropriate, like, you have commercial users for this thing, like you have a lot of apps, for digital payments and things. Of course, digital kind of crimes are much more increasing. In fact, that is another realm which we have been dealing with on cyber crimes and things. Right now, we don't need to, because when the indigenous communities are impacted by that, or poor communities are impacted by that, it is the duty of the others who have developed that, who have appropriated these resources. So, in other words, the data sovereignty movement actually talked about the rights of indigenous people in terms of owning, accessing, and possessing the data which is drawn from them, or drawn from their knowledge systems, their customs and practices, or to their territories. So therefore, they have a right. So it is supposed, in fact, or even supported by indigenous people's inherent rights of self-determination and governance over their people. This is what people have been working on and saying, who have been working with the indigenous communities. They have a right to decide whether they should accept you or not accept. In fact, it's one of the ethics that we adopt when we do field work. They can walk over anytime they want. If they don't want to give you information, they can't give. You can't force them. When you say an ethical right here, they have ethical rights. They have rights, and they cannot be denied that. So, in other words, indigenous people's inherent rights of self-determination and governance are also linked to this. That means if they withdraw the right over the data, you cannot use it anymore because they have the property rights. So, in practice, this means the indigenous people need to be decision makers. They need to be decision makers on how data about them is used or deployed, including within social program algorithms. In fact, many of the software companies work with anthropologists and others, because after all, it is the behavior which is important to be programmed so that you can alter the mindsets of people. Social media is doing that. People use fake news and other kinds of things, deep fakes, just to change your this thing, and you start believing they are true. Even if they are proved wrong, you don't, because they can brainwash you. That's what they are doing in the realm of politics and others. Social media is playing havoc in many cases. And so, in other words, what we are trying to talk about is, according to some of the scholars, AI tools can be used to quantify the cultural distance of indigenous people from the others, who are, in fact, they get subjected to migration with them. When they migrate, in fact, you can see how all these things happen. That means one can quantitatively measure the degree of ethnic identity that the indigenous communities and individuals have, and you can use that even to, separate people. In fact, you can put, now what is happening is, between communities, you can play and then increase the distance. And so AI applications are relevant to, relevant to, especially when we employ, I'm talking about the oral traditions. They can be used like speech and text technologies, text-based technologies, they can be used to revitalize and preserve indigenous languages, indigenous cultures and technologies or knowledges. So AI can be for public engagement and education. That means educational efforts with the indigenous groups, they give voice to marginalized groups if we harness it properly. And in fact, this is what was highlighted in the Indigenous Protocols and AI Working Group publication in 2020. And in fact, this is essential because how one can, you see, technology left to themselves, these people will not have access. But if you make efforts, bring them into this, and then they at least get the benefit of it, both in terms of education, both in terms of preserving their knowledges, preserving their languages and other things. I think that goes a long way in protecting their resources and other things. And indigenous knowledge systems are, why we say that is important, because they are holistic, they are dynamic, innovative, and generative systems. In fact, they are embedded in their lived experiences. That's why it is not something that their imagination. Their practical, that is, I call it as a people science. And we need to keep in mind that all technical systems, as I said earlier, are social and cultural systems. And the AI designers, they need to be aware of their own cultural frameworks, because their cultural frameworks, with that if they design, there is bias already creeps in. That is what we call in anthropology ethnocentrism. So indigenous people across the world have faced and continue to face effects of colonization, of mind control. And this is where we now make, not as a universal, but as a local kind of applications, then we can at least revive and protect these communities. So therefore, AI becomes very important to address the concerns of indigenous and marginalized communities. And is it okay if I take another 5-10 minutes?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. So what is that AI can take care of here? I would like to talk about cultural context and localization. Now, if you really look at ethics, ethics are basically moral principles which are embedded in a culture which regulate human behavior and are essential for any normative society. This is what we all learned during our courses or during our learning processes, not only in education but also in living in a society. Therefore, taking cognizance of the cultural context is essential right from the designing of AI algorithms, because that will enable to build localized AI, because we are using localized knowledge systems, localized cultural kind of knowledges. So in this context, it is essential for us to recognize or even to recapitulate the UNESCO recommendations on AI ethics that broadly emphasized on universal principles that cannot compromise on human dignity, equity, and respecting cultural traditions, or what we call cultural relativism. And number two is localization and inclusiveness to address the issues related to specific communities or regions. This is where I said there are no universal solutions. There are only local solutions. There are no universal problems. There are only local problems. And that is where AI localization becomes important. So understanding the problem in this context is important. That means studies have shown that AI has widened the inequalities, as we already talked about, and a digital divide between the well-off and the marginal communities. It is also linked to the economic well-being of the people. Therefore, the well-off control as well as use AI to further increase their political and economic influence. So, which means that this divide is partly rooted in the economic and other backgrounds. So, AI ethics therefore play an important role in regulating the proper usage of AI. In fact, you can go through UNESCO's AI ethics. In fact, our committee, AI ethics committee, actually information ethics committee, contributed to that. In fact, our committee chairperson was one of the persons involved in that drafting. And that means what is important for us here is, since AI is linked to all these kinds of economic and other divides, AI ethics can only be brought in to regulate the usage of it. And that means we need to acknowledge that biases in AI ethics hurts marginal communities more than the others, because if you just bypass that, it doesn't harm the better off, because they are already, the programs are written by them and the biases are already there. So we need to understand that there is a tendency for AI, like the process of globalization, to lead to homogenization of cultures and also to subvert multiculturalism and multilingualism. That is where, if you localize it, this subversion can be stopped. And cultural, that means we need to be clear that the different sets of problems that are being faced by people are largely local and they require local solutions. So cultural knowledge provides more appropriate solutions to these problems, be they in the area of environment, agriculture, animal husbandry, or land management, whatever you have. So therefore, it's important to incorporate local knowledge into the algorithms of AI to localize its applications, to find solutions to the problems which are local, as I mentioned. So like knowledge and geographical and socio-cultural diversities, AI has to be diversified as far as its applications are concerned, though certain areas of AI may have universal applications. So in this regard, a multicultural approach to
Push up. Oh, there you go. Hard. No, do not stop me.
Just a second.
Push the fuck out.
Aryan, mute everyone and then.
Oh, there you go. Hard. No, do not stop me. Oh my God. What? You already know how. Push the fuck out.
Okay, Aryan, is it under control?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, can you unmute, sir? And so we can't hear you. I think we have to unmute. Aryan, just unmute, sir.
Now you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So it's almost done.
Yeah, sorry for
Yeah. So what I've been saying is it's essential to incorporate local knowledge into the algorithms of AI to localize its applications for finding solutions to the problem. And that means like knowledge, as I mentioned, and also geographical and socio-cultural diversities, AI also has to be diversified. And that's where it can help in, if we adopt a multicultural approach to AI, it can address many issues relating to differential access, inclusiveness, respecting cultural relativism, etc. Therefore, AI ethics need to take note of all these aspects in order to achieve a just and human society. And that is where I would like to summarize as a kind of a way out is we need sensitizing the AI programmers, designers, and practitioners about geographical, environmental, economic, and socio-cultural diversities or cultural relativism and other significant markers that exist among human societies, including nation states, which is essential. That means educating or sensitizing the people who write the algorithms, because they must work with the people if we want to use. That's where we can make them as a stakeholders. And they have a right, because they become co-producers, the indigenous communities, because that is their knowledge. And they have a right over it. If anybody benefits out of it, these people should benefit first, and a marginal amount should go to others. So the stakeholders should recognize and implement the
अबे चुप हो जा हरामखोर चुप हो जा चुप हो जा बे चूती है
Please go ahead, sir. We just had to remove the person.
Okay, and anyway, I'm done with almost. So what is important is the stakeholders should recognize and implement the AI designing and see its use by working with the communities, not by taking advantage of the knowledge of the communities. So that means for building inclusive and sustainable societies, it is essential to have localized AI by incorporating indigenous knowledges, working with the indigenous communities. So in other words, decentralization of the entire AI life cycle is essential. And that means we need to decentralize AI life cycle that includes AI governance, design, and application to address local problems, especially in a multicultural context like that of India and others. It may not apply so much for the European other countries because they are not so multicultural. And many of the, the global south are multicultural. So to localize AI, indigenous knowledge can immensely contribute to inclusive and sustainable societies, because that is when you find solutions to local problems, environmental other problems, you are building a sustainable societies. And thereby, we are able to at least meet partially the goals of sustainable development by 2030. I don't think we will be able to meet, because already 2030 is not very far, as earlier it happened with others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This was a very, very insightful lecture, very informative and very timely. And as you have dealt with so many intersections of issues, like basically looking at technological development, socio-cultural and economic disparities, and how AI can either benefit or make it worse. And we have from the beginning seen that how science can be a boon or a bane. And here AI equally, it's doing very well in so many places, but at the same time, when it comes to indigenous communities, how we all have to be extra cautious on how this can have further disparities in the world. And you also brought in a very important point of how 6% indigenous communities are protecting 80% biodiversity, the knowledge systems which they have. And how do we protect their languages and cultures is something which is very, very important. I think it's also important to see how role of anthropologists becomes so important to bridge the technologists and also the indigenous communities, and how to empower the indigenous communities with the use of AI, especially for their own development. I think these are very, very important issues which you raised today. And before it's too late, I think like many scholars are also writing about the ethical use of AI and how AI can further benefit the whole of humanity rather than furthering the disparities. I think this was a very, very interesting and very timely lecture. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, sir. And I'm really glad that some of our senior colleagues are also here, and well-wishers of AIF. We'll be very happy some of our friends and colleagues can open up and then ask questions or queries or share their thoughts on this. I think there's also a question in the chat box. Let me just find it out. GV Krishna is here, sir, and probably Krishna, I would like to unmute and ask if you are around. Yeah, he's given an example of Sagility India, a company which is applying AI in healthcare solutions.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, Sunita, thanks. I think, may I ask, may I continue?
Please go ahead.
Am I audible? Am I audible, Sunita?
Very much, very much.
Very much. So at the very outset, sir, I'd like to thank, for enlightening us on AI and indigenous communities, the impact of AI and indigenous communities. One of the, areas where I'm also consulting in my work domain is emissions, carbon emissions. So carbon emissions is a topic now that is being widely debated and discussed all across the world, because every country has a target to achieve net zero, for itself. And in the context of this, I think there are a lot of AI applications where indigenous communities can be deployed and assimilated their natural intelligence, or NI, what we call it as NI, because that needs to be assimilated with the algorithms that are being developed to reduce the emissions in order to achieve net zero. And also the point that you were mentioning that 80% of the remaining biodiversity that is being managed by the indigenous community can be protected and it can sustain for ages to come only when I think these applications and the indigenous communities are assimilated into the developmental process of the solutions that are being worked out for achieving net zero.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. You see, the carbon trade is a big business.
Yeah,
You don't know it better than me because I've been teaching a law earlier, but carbon trade, it's like trading in the air. And
yeah,
when I have zero emissions, then I can sell that to somebody who is emitting more. He'll buy.
correct.
That means they can pollute at your cost. They can spoil the atmosphere environment at your cost because you are paid for that. We
Right.
feel happy that we have zero emissions, but the zero emissions are nullified by somebody else. It's a big this thing kind of issues that we can talk about. But then when we are looking at here, you see, these are local. Any kind of emission that we are talking about is local.
Yeah.
If local industries are there, how many of those industries are controlling their pollutions? Whether in terms of the liquid pollutants or air pollutants.
Yeah.
And we have control mechanisms, but they never work. They control
Yes.
you, but not them.
Right.
There is so much of pilferage form of corruption. Leave
Right.
aside. But here, if we, in fact, we are impressing on from the group that we are working with and the UNESCO Information Ethics group, and also with the Translation Commons, where we are dealing with a lot of tech companies, those who are working with Microsoft and others in designing
Yeah.
keyboards and others. We are talking to them, and then they are also working with many of the indigenous communities and trying to use that knowledge basically to find solutions locally. And you see, unfortunately, we don't have any cultural rights. If you look at in Brazil and Mexico and other places, the communities, indigenous communities, have cultural rights. In fact, our communities have no rights.
Right.
Their only right is to be exploited.
But that is happening, sir. In India, I think it is very rampant, primarily because a lot of politicization of civilizations, and I think to further the interests of one particular section.
Let me not get into those terminology. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is the way right from the beginning,
Yeah.
colonizing the indigenous communities' lands and areas.
Yeah.
And earlier they debunked their knowledge. Now they say that knowledge is useful. Like for example, during 70s, we were all eating food produced through organic agriculture.
Right.
With the Green Revolution, organic agriculture is gone.
Right.
And all our soils and everything is gone. Now we are going back to organic. And we want to teach the same peasants or farmers how to do organic agriculture. This is the height of hypocrisy.
Right.
I won't say hypocrisy, it's a business. I'm reselling their own knowledge to them. This is happening. So instead, if people consciously work with the communities, and they can become, they can earn money out of that.
Right.
And once they become, kind of earners through their knowledge, which can also protect the environment and also other kinds of things, then they can say tomorrow, look, this data are mine. You cannot use it without our permission.
Correct, sir. As anthropologists, I think, I mean, more specifically, when we anthropologists have been working with the indigenous communities, in some sense, I think it makes the responsibility of anthropologists to actually acclimatize the indigenous communities about the economic opportunity that exists in maintaining the biodiversity, like you were talking about carbon trading and all that. I think there's more work in that domain in terms of which tree will emit more oxygen as compared to another tree. Now, how the emissions can be captured and you ascribe some certain numerical value to that particular emission, and then trade and probably help them in economically uplift their community, indigenous communities.
No, but actually, if you look at their knowledge, they know which plants and which plants are good, which plants are bad.
Right.
They have a better knowledge. We don't need to
Correct.
educate. We need to learn from them and use that. For example, they don't dig. If you go to any of the indigenous community areas, they don't dig deeper. They're with a digging stick. Now we know if you dig further, carbon emissions increases. That's where zero tillage agriculture or no tillage agriculture has come.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of literature on that. But basically what my focus is, AI is a technology. Because the technology can get into any realm.
Right.
But if that is used very positively, it can help the humanity. It can also help the indigenous community to not only to survive, to thrive.
Right.
To thrive.
Right, sir.
So that is what we all need. In fact, we are working with some technologies. In fact, they are also in agreement with what we are talking about. And in fact, I have some good friends from the US who have been working on this. They are talking about localized AI and other things.
Right.
Yeah.
Not only that, sir, I mean, one of the major concerns for indigenous communities and so also us is you were talking about data sovereignty.
Yes.
Now, a lot of our data is our private data. I mean, our personal data is already in the public domain. And, like you said, social media is rampantly using our personal data for it, meeting its business objectives.
Right.
I think, and it's a question of ethics. I mean, it's a question of ethics. I think there has to be a voice in terms of protecting the personal data of individuals, so also the indigenous communities, and there has to be some kind of regulation in terms of protecting that data, because eventually in the years to come, this data is going to be used by several companies, several people working in the space of artificial intelligence, and to meet their business and economic objectives. This is being used as it is. It has been been used by several companies, like you name the company, that company is using our personal data to promote business objectives of companies that they are associated with.
So in fact, there are.
So I think a regulation to protect this has already started happening in the music industry, sir. I think a lot of voices are being raised to protect the musical rights and the lyrical rights that they. It should also probably happen to.
No, Krishna. One thing you must remember here.
Yeah.
Is one is individual rights, another is community rights. When we are talking about indigenous communities, it is the knowledge is community right. And we need to first of all develop IPRs for communities. And in fact, I was in Mumbai on land management thing. I was mentioning to them, individual rights and community rights are to be defined. The governments have not done that. Government only emphasizes on individual rights and divide communities on individual rights. And community property, common pool resources, all are gone. So this is where, in fact, we have been discussing with some other, law universities and others. Some of them are working on them. And if they, legal systems have to also come out with that. In fact, there are efforts. Let's hope something will happen.
Right.
Thank you, Krishna. Thank you so much for that question.
Right.
Irfan has a comment which is answering his own question, saying that AI has been ethically used to empower indigenous communities, particularly in preserving their languages and cultural heritage, as seen in projects like Google Maori language integration or rainforest connection forest monitoring. I think these are some of the examples. Prachi, would you like to unmute and ask?
Yes, ma'am. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay. A very good evening, sir. I've been working as a research scholar under Professor Abhi Ghosh at
Okay.
Punjab University,
Ah,
Chandigarh, and I've been working on PVTGs, specifically one in the area of Gujarat.
yeah.
And I've been trying to incorporate AI, that is, through various different softwares with the help of one of my family members who knows how these thing works and is involved in an AI studio also. But still we faced a problem while looking into transcriptions and translations things with respect to the regional language, specifically those spoken by the tribal community that I'm working on. So one major issue that I faced is that they have a dialect which is very different even from the original Gujarati language that local people speak. So there I felt kind of a loophole that comes in is number one, we need to have a proper set of things so that it is easier for us when it comes to specifically language and incorporating AI into works related to it. Second thing that I feel is when it comes to AI and AI studios in India, not many big companies or stakeholders would step in to help us in this specific case. And we, being researchers, do not hold that capital to be able to work on that. So, what could be a probable way out according to you in such case?
See, there are two things. One is you are working with the communities and trying to digitalize or apply AI to that. The community should work with you on that. That's the first ethical issue. That means community is aware, community is contributing to it. That means community has a stake in it. Second, if we are talking about dialect, if the dialect doesn't have a script, if it is a only oral kind of a thing, if it's not necessary that you need to have a script, but you can develop. If there are, because I know some people who work on these things, if there are some linguists who can develop dictionaries of the people, who can develop the lexicon and other kinds of things, and then that means you are, because the idioms that are there, they have different meanings. If you translate into English or other languages, it will have a absolutely not matching kind of a meaning. That's where the idiom that is used locally is important, because that carries a lot of meanings for what they are expressing. In fact, I have known some people among the Mundas and also among the Savara who have worked. They were with us on Translation Commons, and they were some technology people. They got into this and then started working on the scripts and everything. I also know some people who have extensively worked on indigenous community scripts, developing scripts. But I don't find developing a script is a solution, because if I develop a script, it takes years for them to adopt it and then popularize. It takes, by the time that language might completely be over. Instead, what we need to do is use that knowledge, preserve it, and also try to digitalize that knowledge, digitalize that language, so that we are trying to build parallel dictionaries for that language. It's a huge task. What you are trying to do is not that easier, and using AI and all that, which requires a lot of other groundwork, both cultural, linguistic, and other kind of groundwork. So it is, you don't take it as a PhD topic, but take it as your life mission, because that has different meaning. Here, for a PhD, if you want to complete, you will not be able to complete even if somebody is helping you in that. Because what is that you are building? You are building only algorithms which others will understand. If you are writing a thesis to for a degree, your examiners will not understand that. You cannot submit your algorithms to an examiner unless you are doing it to some computer, software persons. So you must be clear about what you are trying to do. So
Yes.
yeah,
Basically, my
ah,
PhD is not on AI, but it's just like we've been discussing it here.
yeah.
It's just for a kind of a human mission that I am on, that I really wanted to develop certain kind of a software or something so that it helps others also.
No, it is right. You can have a long-term perspective. Working on that will not happen in a matter of 1 or 2 years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It takes time. In fact, I know I can suggest to some people. In fact, from I have through LinkedIn, when I was looking at, I have taken one of the former students of Punjab University. I'll tell you her name. She also presented a paper along with one of the scholars from Punjab University. And it is basically what I am trying to tell you is that it takes, because some people who are working on visual media and digitalizing that visual kind of things. Also, how the knowledge that are there in specific regions, specific realms, you can work on it, because you cannot work on whole set of knowledges. You can work on only some branch of that knowledge and how go into depth. For example, if you are working in the area of health, you can talk about indigenous health systems. You can talk about indigenous practitioners, indigenous pharmacopoeia, and all those kind of things. And record very carefully. And they will not give you so easily unless and until they know that it is being used for positively, because not for commercial purposes. That's where the knowledge systems, they were intentionally, they were never trading it. They never benefited out of that. So you must be careful about that. And you see, we, in our enthusiasm, we might do some things, but somebody else will take benefit. So you must protect the community's rights, right? I hope you understand what I'm saying.
But
Yes.
sir, if it is a language of Gujarati, Prachi, is that right? You were working in with some communities in Gujarat.
Yes, sir.
So
No,
Gujarat, you have some transliteration companies or the transliteration tools that are available on the net, which can be used to kind of build solutions that you are aiming to build. And you can also partially take the help of some of the experts in the language, and with a combination of technology and linguistics, as I sir said, some linguistic expert who's well versed with the Gujarati language can also come in as a proofreader or validator of the language accuracy or the correctness of the content.
No, she is not talking about the Gujarati language. She is talking about the dialect. That dialect.
She's talking about a dialect in Gujarati. Yeah, you have different dialects. Yes.
Exactly. So
But sir, we have some I worked for a very very long time in a company that actually built assessments for learning using a lot of AI technologies. I'm talking about way back 12, 13, 9, 10 year 2009, and that around that time I think we've used the expertise of the local university professors and lecturers in helping us to
that's true.
we build the assessments in English language and we transliterate them into Gujarati and
Yeah.
different dialects. We incorporate a bit of different dialects also in structuring the content also. So I think she can probably use that, is what I was just thinking.
Actually, because I know even in the University of Hyderabad, the cults, they have had a kind of projects on this, but it's a very, you see, you need a lot of things, including developing dictionaries, developing many other things. It takes time. And another thing is the dialect, the meanings in the dialects. If you understand them, that's where anthropologists are told to learn the local language, to work with them, so that you understand their mindset, you understand their what we call their own epistemologies. So it takes time. It is when one is interested in expanding laterally, I think one need to put in a lot of effort. It's not one or two persons, it needs a team of diverse expertise. Somebody in software, because software people should understand the behavioral aspects to write the algorithms. And
Right.
they should understand the meanings locally. The meanings could be different from other languages.
Right.
So this is a little complex thing, and I think she should find a way, and if she is interested in later, possibly she could consult any one of us.
Yeah. So I think that's what is very important, sir. As you said, the community should be made stakeholders, and especially the indigenous communities. If anything we are doing related to their languages or their ecological understandings, because in my own work in ethnomedicine, Ayush did a very big project to document audio-visually their healing practices.
Yeah.
But when I spoke to the healers, many of them said they did not reveal the true crux of the healing, because they said it will be commercialized, or if they share the knowledge, the efficacy will go. So they have their own worldview about it, and I think it's not so easy. But at the same time, very important to take them into confidence, and unless they have that trust that it is for their benefit, things will not work out. And I think that's where we have to be very careful when we introduce all this technology.
In fact, their ethics is that any community knowledge should be used for community, not for pecuniary gain.
Yeah, and very important, as you said, IPR we've been talking about. We have never talked about community ownership and IPR for the community. And that's where even post-tsunami, I realized the interventions which were top-down, dividing the community, even the joint families, and they all, got disintegrated. So that was a wonderful lecture, sir. Thank you so much. And Krishna, thank you. And others who have raised very pertinent questions. It was wonderful.
I have taken help of Krishna and also Karthik that time when we were doing the project with British Council.
Right. No, that's how I know our alumni at HSU has been working on these very topics way back. As you said, Krishna, in 2011-12, that was a new thing then. So that's cool. So thank you so much, sir, and thank you everyone for staying back and listening to the lecture.
Thanks, Sunita, for moderating it very effectively.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks for everybody.
Yeah,
and
thank
you
you.
can share my email if somebody wants to.
Yes, we'll do that. And all of you, as you can be in touch with AIF and be part of it, either as members or interns, whatever you want, and be in touch and get more and more good lectures which we are organizing every month. So thank you so much, sir, and wonderful again having your lecture on our platform. We'll keep in touch, sir. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, guys, thank you and good night. I think we can take leave.
Bye.